The tapping started at 3:17 a.m. Not the kind of tapping you ignore, like tree branches in the wind or some critter skittering under the floorboards. This was deliberate, rhythmic, like fingernails rapping against metal from inside a car trunk. 3 taps, pause, 3 more, then silence, like it was waiting to see if I'd heard. I had. I was in the office, dozing off in the chair behind the counter with a stale cup of gas station coffee in my hand. When the tapping started, every hair on my arm stood up, not just because of the sound, but because Bay 3 was supposed to be empty. I didn't move at first. I listened, heart thudding. Nothing but the hum of the soda machine and the ticking clock above the door. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I was just tired. Hell, I was always tired lately. Then it happened again. 3 sharp raps from the direction of the garage. Against every instinct, I grabbed the flashlight, slid my keys from the hook, and unlocked the side door to the bays. The smell of oil and old rubber hit me as I stepped inside, flashlight beams slicing through the dark. Bay 1, empty. Bay 2, empty. Bay 3, a car sat there now, silver Honda Accord, late 90s model, dented. Rust creeping along the fenders, headlights off, engine cold. I hadn't left it there. The logbook didn't show a drop-off, and the garage had been locked since midnight. I stepped closer. The air around it felt wrong, too still, too heavy, like walking underwater. I swept the light across the hood, up to the windshield. The windows were so tinted I couldn't see inside. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came again, from the trunk. My hand hovered over the keyring. I had no reason to open that trunk. No explanation for how the car got there, but something compelled me. Some part of me, the part that didn't know better, wanted to look. The tap came once more, this time softer, more urgent. I turned away. I wasn't brave. Not that night. Instead, I locked the bay door, went back into the office, and wrote down every detail. That's when I found the journal. It was sitting on the counter where my coffee had been, like it had always been there. Leather-bound, old but not worn. Its cover bore no title, just an embossed emblem that looked like an eye split down the center by a key. I opened it, heart still racing. Inside were dated entries, written in handwriting not my own. The first entry was dated the next day, March 6th. A silver Accord appears in Bay 3 tonight. Do not open the trunk. Do not speak to what's inside. Leave the car untouched. Someone will arrive for it in the morning. They will not speak. Do not ask questions. I slammed the journal shut and backed away like it had burned me. My mouth had gone dry, my skin clammy. That entry described exactly what just happened. Before it had happened. There were more entries, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all future dated, all matter of fact and cold, predictions, warnings, rules. Taped to the back cover was a crumpled note in handwriting that looked fresh. Follow the rules or they'll come through. Underneath a list, never read more than 1 day ahead. Never share the journal's contents with anyone. Never attempt to prevent what's written. Always keep the journal within 100 feet of the garage. Never write in the journal yourself. If you hear tapping from inside a vehicle at night, do not investigate alone. If a customer arrives in a black sedan after sunset, do not accept their keys. I laughed, but it caught in my throat. Some kind of elaborate prank. But then morning came. At 7:03 a.m., a man walked through the front door. No knock, no eye contact. Thin, pale, dressed in black. Said nothing. Just walked past me into the bay, slid behind the wheel of the Accord, and drove away. No engine noise, no tire squeal, just gone. I stood frozen, gripping the journal like a talisman. Something was very wrong in evening shade, and somehow I'd been chosen. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at the counter, flipping the journal open, then slamming it shut again, like it might start bleeding if I stared too long. I read the March 6th entry again, slowly this time, noting how exact it was. The timing, the description, even the fact that the visitor wouldn't speak. It was all true. And the instructions, I hadn't opened the trunk, hadn't spoken to what was inside. I had followed the entry without even realizing it. That's probably why I was still breathing. I only looked 1 day ahead, as the rule demanded. I didn't dare turn the page to March 7th. Not yet. By noon, I almost convinced myself it had all been a stress-induced hallucination. That is, until the town sheriff walked through the front door. Sheriff Hank Billings was the kind of guy who could gut a deer while humming Patsy Cline. Broad-shouldered, leathery-faced, wore the same scuffed boots every day since I moved here. "Morning, Mike," he said, tipping his hat. "You do night work now?" No, why?" He thumbed toward the road. "Got a complaint this morning. Local said they saw headlights in your bay after 3. Thought it was odd." My pulse jumped. "Just checking inventory. One of the old cars had an issue." He gave me a look, the kind that says he knows I'm lying but doesn't care enough to press. "Well, you see anyone strange? We had a break-in at the feed store last week. Nothing taken but weird footprints." I shook my head. "Didn't see a soul." He lingered, then said, "Keep your doors locked. It's that time of year again." "What time of year?" He didn't answer, just tapped the brim of his hat and left. I spent the rest of the day jumpy, checking the corners of the shop, flinching every time a tool dropped. The journal sat next to the register like it was waiting for me. Finally, at 9 p.m., I cracked it open again. March 7th. Entry: a man will stop by at 9:23 p.m. His name is Marcus Caulfield. Do not ask how he found the garage. Do not tell him about the journal. He will try to warn you. Let him speak. Do not interrupt. When he finishes, he will leave. Lock the door behind him. I stared at the words. My hand started trembling. At 9:21, I turned off the lights and waited by the door. At 9:23 on the dot, someone knocked. 3 times, rapid and sharp. I opened it. The man standing there looked like he hadn't slept in a year. Greasy brown hair, wiry frame, wearing a windbreaker despite the heat. His eyes were wide, haunted, locked onto the journal on the desk behind me. "You found it, didn't you?" he whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. "I had it before you," he said, stepping inside. "Back when I was working the Shell station off Route 10. It was in a white Ford Taurus, slipped under the passenger seat like it was hiding. I took it home. That was my first mistake." He never blinked, never stopped pacing. "You follow the rules?" he asked. I think so." Marcus laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Think? You better know, man. Every rule is a lock on a door, and those locks are rusting." I swallowed hard. "What is it? Who wrote it?" He stopped cold. "You ever heard of the couriers?" The word gave me a chill I couldn't explain. They're not ghosts. They're not demons. They're messengers for something worse. They don't talk. They don't sleep. They wait. And when someone breaks the rules, that's when they try to come through. They use people, hollow 'em out. He turned toward the window. "You'll start to see them soon. In reflections, in dreams. Don't look too long. Don't listen if they speak. They're not talking to you. They're talking to what's underneath." I tried to ask a question, but remembered the entry. "Do not interrupt," he continued. "When I broke the rules, I thought I could fix it. Burned the journal. Thought that'd end it. But it just moved. Found you. It always finds someone." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small wooden figure. Looked like a man, but wrong. Too many joints. A face stretched in agony. "I made this to trap one. It doesn't work, but keep it close. It might delay things." He handed it to me, his fingers trembling. Then, without another word, he walked to the door and left. I locked it behind him. The journal didn't say what would happen next. But something had changed. I could feel it. The air felt heavier, the shadows deeper. That night, I dreamed of cars. Hundreds of them. Parked in a field with no road, stretching as far as I could see. Each one had something inside, scratching at the windows, tapping. When I woke up, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You let him speak." Good. No sender, no reply option. I bolted upright and checked the office. The journal was open. To March 8th, even though I hadn't turned the page. The journal was open when I walked in that morning. Open to March 8th, the page I hadn't dared flip to the night before. It was still early. The town outside was grey with mist, the sky the colour of cold ash. I hadn't even made coffee yet when I stepped into the garage and saw the open journal sitting on the front counter. like it had been waiting for me. The entry read, "Do not open the red toolbox in Bay 2. No matter what you hear, do not move it. Do not speak to it. A customer will arrive at 11:45 a.m. asking for an oil change on a green Dodge Ram. Accept the keys. Check the oil. Nothing else." I froze. The red toolbox in Bay 2 had belonged to Charlie Mercer, the guy who ran the garage before me. After he died, I never got around to going through it. I figured maybe one day, but the thing was heavy and jammed shut. I hadn't even touched it since I moved in, but now it was part of the journal. And that made it dangerous. At 10:15 a.m., I was standing in Bay 2 checking the tires on a Buick when I heard it tap, tap, tap from the toolbox. 3 sharp knocks, exactly like the sound I'd heard from the Accord's trunk. I backed away slowly. My brain screamed to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. The sound came again. Then a voice, muffled, software, female. "Help me." The words weren't loud, just a whisper, like breath against my ear, but they came from inside the toolbox. "Please, it's dark, so dark." I clenched my jaw and turned away. I wanted to help. Every instinct in me told me to pry it open, to prove it was just some sick trick. But I remembered the journal's warning. Do not open it. That voice, it didn't sound right. It had emotion, sure, but something about it felt forced, like a mimic trying to remember what a scared woman should sound like. It chilled me more than the voice itself. At 11:45 on the dot, a green Dodge Ram pulled into the gravel lot out front. A wiry old man climbed out, beard like tangled moss, smelling like wet copper and pine tar. He didn't introduce himself, just walked in and dropped the keys on the counter. "Oil change," he grunted. I nodded, heart hammering. Took the keys, walked back to Bay 1 and popped the hood. The oil was full, dark, thick, but full. Still, I pretended to change it. Ran the routine, swapped the filter, refilled the same amount I drained. Just enough to make it look right. I didn't look under the truck, didn't check the tires, didn't peek in the cab. When I handed him the keys, he stared at me for too long. His eyes were cloudy, like storm glass. "You seen her yet?" he asked. I blinked. "Seen who?" His lips curled into a grin that showed black teeth. "She's been knocking. Always knocks first." He left before I could say anything else. That night, the tapping came again, not just from the toolbox, but from every corner of the garage, the metal shelves in the back, the old vending machine, the locked trunk of a Chevy Impala that hadn't run in months. Tap, 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 always in threes, always in rhythm. I locked every door, drew the blinds, and sat with my back to the wall and the journal in my lap. I hadn't broken a rule. I knew I hadn't. But the tapping wouldn't stop. Then I remembered Marcus's words. They use people. Hollow 'em out. What if the voice in the toolbox wasn't a person anymore? What if it never was? My phone vibrated at 3:03 a.m. No caller ID, one new voicemail. I didn't want to check it. But I did. The message was short, 3 seconds. A woman's voice, not crying, not screaming, just whispering, "Let me out." I deleted it, but the voice stayed in my head long after sunrise. The next morning, I got a call from Sheriff Billings. He didn't sound right, slurred, like he'd just come off a bender or had a stroke mid-sentence. "Mike," he mumbled, "need you to come down to the Lake Road. Real bad wreck. Car flipped into the ditch. You'll need the tow." I didn't argue, just grabbed the keys and hitched the old wrecker. I found the wreck about 10 miles out of town. A silver Buick, nose down in the drainage culvert. Mud splashed across the windshield. The driver's side door was wide open, no sign of the driver. But scratched into the hood in deep gouges were words. "She's in the box." My hands went ice cold. I towed the Buick back, left it outside the garage, and went straight to the toolbox. I didn't open it, but I touched it. The metal felt warm, and it pulsed. Once, like something inside had a heartbeat. Back at the counter, the journal was open again. This time, without my help. March 9th. Do not look in the rearview mirror between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. If you do, whatever you see will see you too. If it knocks, don't answer. If it calls your name, pretend you didn't hear. The rest of the page was smudged, but at the bottom a new line appeared as I watched. One rule will break tonight. There's something deeply wrong about being told the future, especially when the prediction involves your failure. That final line from the March 9th entry, "One rule will break tonight," sat in my head like a ticking bomb. It didn't say which rule or how, just that it would happen. I spent most of the day glued to the journal, trying to bargain with it in my mind. Like maybe if I stayed awake, alert, paranoid enough, I could stop it. By 9 p.m., I had locked every door, unplugged the phone, switched off the lights, sat in a folding chair with a crowbar in one hand and the strange wooden totem Marcus had given me in the other. I kept glancing at the red toolbox in Bay 2, which hadn't made a sound since the tapping the day before. Nothing happened for hours. Then the power went out. No flicker, no warning. Just the heavy silence of a world unplugged. I lit a flashlight and aimed it at the journal. The beam flickered like it didn't want to touch the pages. I flipped ahead, despite the rule against reading more than a day ahead. I had to know. March 10th was blank, so was March 11th. But something was scratched into the bottom corner of the page, not written, etched with something sharp. "You looked." I slammed it shut. The flashlight fizzled and went dark. "Before we move on, please donate me in the form of subscribe." That's when I heard the voice, not outside, not from the garage, from behind me, inside the wrecker cab, which I'd backed in to keep close for the lake wreck. It whispered my name. Mike. I froze. Rule number 6, the one I'd memorized without meaning to. If you hear tapping from inside a vehicle at night, do not investigate alone. There hadn't been any tapping. But this wasn't better. I turned slowly. The flashlight sputtered back to life. The beam cut through the garage, bouncing off glass and chrome and rust. Inside the tow truck, someone was sitting in the passenger seat. A woman, her hair hung wet across her face, dripping onto a pale blue dress. Her head turned, slow and unnatural, neck tilting just a bit too far. "Mike," she said again, "you left me there." I dropped the flashlight. When I picked it up, she was gone. But the door to the tow truck was now open. I hadn't touched it. I knew I hadn't touched it. I backed up toward the journal. The power blinked back on with a thrum. Fluorescence buzzed above me, my eyes adjusted. And then I saw it. A single handprint on the passenger side window of the tow truck. Small, wet, fingers too long. I turned to the journal, heart slamming against my ribs. The page had turned again, on its own. March 10th now had writing. Rule number 3 has been broken. You attempted to prevent what was written. A courier now knows your name. I read it twice, then 3 times. The realization dropped into my stomach like lead. When I peeked ahead to March 10th, trying to anticipate the danger, I was trying to prevent it. I'd broken rule number 3, and something had seen me. Later that morning, around 6 a.m., I got a knock at the garage door. Too early for customers. I cracked it open to find Sheriff Billings, standing with his arms folded, hat pulled low, eyes bloodshot. "You hear anything last night?" he asked. I lied. "Number why?" He held up a small evidence bag. Inside was a cassette tape. "Found this in the wrecked Buick. Glove box was locked from the inside. No fingerprints." "What's on it?" He shrugged. "Haven't listened yet. Thought I'd let you do the honors. You're good with old machines, right?" I took the tape, throat dry. "You sure that's a good idea?" "Nothing about this week's been a good idea," he said, then paused. "Mike, do you know the name Wendy Billings?" That stopped me cold. "Number should I?" He nodded slowly, not meeting my eyes. "She was my wife. Died 6 years ago. Car crash. But before that, she kept a journal. Real strange thing. Came out of nowhere. She said it helped her predict things. At first, I thought it was just grief talking." He rubbed his eyes. "But now I'm not so sure." He left without another word. I stared at the cassette for a long time. Then I dug out the ancient stereo in the back room, loaded the tape, and hit play. White noise. Then a voice. A woman's. "Day 47. The journal told me about the man with the green truck." I followed the rules. But the knocking, it started anyway. My spine turned to ice. "I saw one last night. Through the mirror. It didn't have a face, just skin where a mouth should be. It watched me. I think it knows I'm not strong enough. A beat of silence, then quietly, Hank, I'm sorry. The tape clicked. I sat there, unable to move. The woman in the recording, Wendy Billings, had once kept the journal. She broke a rule too. And whatever she saw, it followed her, just like it's following me. When I returned to the front desk, the journal had flipped again. March 11th. Entry. A black sedan will arrive at 7:09 p.m. It will idle. The driver will not exit. You must not approach. You must not accept the keys. If you do, the next entry will write itself in your blood. I counted down the hours like a man awaiting execution. March 11th was etched into my thoughts with the same weight as a death sentence. The journal hadn't been wrong yet. If anything, it had understated the danger. And now it had delivered its most specific warning yet. A black sedan will arrive at 7:09 p.m. You must not accept the keys. The message felt like more than just a rule. It was a challenge, a final dare. I spent the day doing what little work I could, routine inspections, tire rotations. But my eyes kept darting to the clock, watching the minute hand slide toward dread. 6:32 p.m. I locked the office door, closed the garage bay, killed the lights, and sat in the dark with the journal in my lap. I didn't know what would happen if I followed the rule perfectly. Would the car just leave? Would I be spared? Or was the journal merely prolonging the inevitable? 6:59 p.m. Crickets chirped in the brush outside. Somewhere in the woods, a coyote howled. A truck passed down the road, headlights sweeping the gravel lot. Then, at 7:09 exactly, the air changed. I didn't see the sedan pull up. It was just there. A black Lincoln, polished and glistening like obsidian, under the garage's security light. It idled quietly, engine purring like a content predator. Tinted windows hid whoever was inside. I stayed behind the front counter, knees locked, palms slick with sweat. The driver didn't move. Neither did I. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then the door opened. Only a sliver, just enough for a hand to emerge. It dangled something, a ring of keys. I closed my eyes. Don't accept them. My body wanted to move. Some strange compulsion tugged at my muscles, a force like gravity urging me forward. The keys called to me, not with sound, but with presence, like an itch in the back of my skull. Then came the knock, not on the door, on the glass of my office window. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The figure standing there wasn't human. At first glance, yes, it had a shape like a man in a long black coat. But its face, it was wrong. Not deformed, but unfinished. No mouth, no eyes, just smooth, taut skin like melted wax stretched over a skull. It raised its hand and knocked again, tap, tap, tap. Then it smiled. No lips, no teeth, but the skin rippled where a grin should have been. I saw something beneath the surface press forward, something clawing from inside its false face. I stumbled back. My body screamed to run, but to where? The garage was sealed. The thing was already here. Suddenly the lights above me flickered and died, and the room was plunged into utter black. I reached for my flashlight, fingers fumbling. Found it. Clicked it on. The beam swept the window. The figure was gone. But now, the keys were on the floor, just inside the office, still glistening, still warm. The driver had never come in, but the keys were here. I backed away from them slowly, fighting every urge to scream, to bolt, to hurl the things out the door and burn them. Then the journal began flipping pages on its own. One by one, they turned, faster and faster, like wind tearing through them, until it landed on March 12th. The entry was written in a new kind of ink. Dark, red, sticky, like blood. You did not take the keys. You delayed the inevitable. But they have your scent now. At the bottom, a new line appeared as I watched. Do not speak the name they give you. The light bulbs above popped in succession, one by one. Sparks rained from the ceiling. I ducked behind the counter as glass shattered. Silence followed. Then, a voice, from the center of the room, low, hollow, wrong. It said my name, but it wasn't my name. Not one anyone had ever called me. It said, Maros. The sound paralyzed me. It vibrated in my teeth, in my spine. like the syllables themselves were older than speech, ancient, rotten with meaning. I bit my tongue to keep from answering. It said it again, louder. Maros. I slammed the journal shut, and the voice stopped. No more sound, no more footsteps, just the wind. I waited for sunrise behind the counter, curled on the cold tile floor, the journal clutched tight in my hands. When morning came, I ventured outside. The black sedan was gone. No tire marks in the gravel, no oil slicks, no evidence it had ever been there. But the keys were still inside. I wrapped them in an oily rag and shoved them into a steel lockbox. Then I buried the lockbox behind the garage, deep in the dirt. 6 feet down. I don't know if that will be enough. I went inside, shaking, and opened the journal to today's date. March 12th. Entry. Do not answer the payphone. It will ring once at 3:16 p.m. Let it ring, even if it uses her voice. Her. I knew who it meant. Wendy. Or at least the thing wearing her. That afternoon, I pulled the old rotary payphone out of the wall, cut the cord, smashed it to pieces. But at 3:16 p.m., it still rang, no wires, no power. Just the hollow brrring echoing in the back of the shop like it had always been there. I didn't answer, but the ringing hasn't stopped. It's still going now, and every so often I hear her voice calling out from it, soft and pleading, "Maros, why did you bury me?" The ringing didn't stop, even after I smashed the payphone to plastic splinters, even after I burned what was left in the gravel lot behind the garage, the sound stayed. It didn't even echo like it was coming from somewhere physical. It was in the walls, in the air. The pitch changed slightly every time it rang, like it was tuning itself to me. By midnight, I'd stuffed cotton in my ears and retreated to the garage office, door barricaded with a metal filing cabinet. The journal sat on my lap like a sleeping bomb. The last thing it had warned me was, even if it uses her voice. It did. Not just Wendy's voice anymore, my mother's, my father's. Voices I hadn't heard in years, familiar phrases, half-remembered lullabies. The phrase my old man always used to say before he'd disappear for a weekend bender. "You'll be okay, Mikey. You're tougher than you look." That voice rang through the ruined phone. It took everything in me not to pick it up. The ringing finally stopped at 3:33 a.m. That was worse than the sound, because it meant whatever was calling had given up on talking and had moved on to the next step. The next day, March 13th, came with a grey sky and the kind of humidity that makes the air feel like wet cloth against your face. I spent the early morning walking the garage perimeter, checking for signs of tampering. I found it on the west side wall, behind the oil drums and junked-out bumper racks. A hole in the concrete. Not a crack, not a break from wear or age. A perfectly round hole about the size of a silver dollar. Too clean to be natural. When I leaned closer, I saw something looking back. Not an eye. Not exactly, just awareness. A shimmer like oil on water, and movement, slow and fluid, just behind the veil. I covered it with duct tape, then stacked a tire rack in front of it. By noon, the smell started. It wasn't gas or oil, not mildew, something worse, like meat left too long in the sun, but sweeter, almost tempting. It drifted in from every corner of the garage. It clung to the ceiling fans, seeped from the floor drains. And then I saw the second hole, inside the front office, directly across from where I usually sit. That's when I realized something. These holes, they weren't coming in. They were for watching. They were already here. I flipped open the journal. The entry for March 13th had changed. Words that hadn't been there that morning now bled through the page. They know you can hear them now. You are becoming visible to them. You are no longer safe in mirrors. I froze. There was a mirror in the bathroom. I turned, inching toward the shop's lone restroom, and pushed the door open slowly. It creaked on its rusted hinges. Inside, the mirror above the sink was fogged, though there'd been no steam. I reached out with my sleeve, wiped it clear, and saw my reflection staring back with a different face. It looked like me. Same jacket, same scar on the temple from where I'd cracked it as a teenager. Same crooked nose, but its eyes were black, not bruised, not shadowed. Just gone. Empty sockets where eyes should have been, with something moving in them. The reflection smiled. I stumbled back, slamming the door shut behind me. I taped over the mirror with a trash bag and duct tape and nailed a board across it for good measure. No more mirrors, no more glass. That afternoon, Sheriff Billings showed up again. He didn't knock, just opened the garage bay and stepped inside like he owned the place. He looked different. Tired, hunched, pale in a way I couldn't quite explain. "You seen anything weird lately?" he asked. I nearly laughed in his face. "I hear tapping, I hear voices, I smell rot and see holes that watch me," I said. "So yeah, I've seen weird." He gave me a long look, then reached into his coat and handed me a photo. Grainy, black and white. It was a picture of my garage, but it was dated 1954. "This used to be called Loring's Auto," he said, "run by a man named Marcus Caulfield." My blood ran cold. "Marcus warned me," I said quietly. "He gave me something, a wooden totem." Billings nodded. "Marcus was a journal keeper too." He pointed at the photo. "That car parked in front. That's a black Lincoln, same as the one that came for you." "So what happened to Marcus?" "He burned his journal," Billings said. "Garage burned with it, but someone rebuilt. The journal came back, always does, like it wants to stay here." My stomach turned. "Did Marcus become one of them?" "No," Billings said, "but his son did." He stepped back toward the door. Before he left, he turned. "If they start calling you by a different name, it means they're almost through." I didn't ask how he knew. I didn't want to know. That night, I checked the journal again. March 14th. Entry. Do not open the garage at dawn. If you see the sunrise through the windshield of any vehicle, you must immediately cover your eyes and lie still. The first one comes with the sun. I looked out the office window. The holes in the walls were bigger now, wider, almost eye-shaped, and something behind them was blinking. I didn't sleep that night. The journal's warning had etched itself into my brain like acid. Do not open the garage at dawn. If you see the sunrise through the windshield of any vehicle, you must immediately cover your eyes and lie still. The first one comes with the sun. It made no sense at first. Sunlight was supposed to be safe, right? The holy water of horror movies. What kind of nightmare welcomes the dawn? I barricaded the bay doors with toolboxes, bolted steel sheets over the windows, stuffed rags in the cracks where morning light could spill in. Anything I could find, I used. But dawn wasn't just a time anymore, it was a thing, a presence. By 5:42 a.m., the sky was shifting to pale violet. I could feel the sun even before it rose, its light bleeding around the edges of the garage like golden smoke. And then the tapping began, not from the walls, not from the ceiling, from inside the cars. Tap, tap, tap. I walked slowly between the vehicles in the garage. My breath was a ragged wheeze. The tapping came from everywhere, from glove boxes, dashboards, trunks. The worst was the silver Honda Accord, the same one where I'd first found the journal. Its windows were completely fogged, like someone was breathing heavily inside. I leaned close, only for the windshield wipers to suddenly activate, scraping a clean streak across the condensation. Through the glass, I saw a silhouette sitting in the driver's seat, and the rising sun behind it. I covered my eyes. I dropped to the floor. I didn't move. Something unlocked inside the car. I heard the click, heard the door creak open, heard feet, bare feet, slap softly against the concrete. Then, nothing. But I knew it was still in the room. I could feel its heat, its gaze. And then a whisper, "Stand up, Marrows." That name again. Not Mike, not even Michael. Marrows. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood, willing myself to stay still. The footsteps circled me. Slow, patient, inhuman. Something touched my hair, then the door to the Accord slammed shut, and the tapping stopped. When I opened my eyes, the sun was up. The car was empty again, not even footprints. But the seatbelt on the driver's side had been buckled, and something was hanging from the rearview mirror. It was a photograph of me, asleep, in the garage office, taken from just a few feet away. Later that day, I went out back to check on the lockbox where I'd buried the black sedan's keys. The ground had been disturbed, fresh dirt, no shovel marks. Just like the earth had opened itself, reached down and pulled the box deeper. I didn't bother digging. I knew what I'd find. Or not find. When I returned to the shop, the office phone, long since disconnected, was ringing again. This time I answered. A breathless voice rasped on the other end, "Don't burn it again, it remembers." Then the line went dead. At 4:17 p.m., the journal flipped open on its own again. The next entry appeared, March 15th. Entry, "You must speak the words exactly as they appear on this page at midnight. If you do not, the holes will open and they will come through. Do not try to memorize them, you must read them directly from the page." Below that was a passage written in a language I'd never seen before. Not Latin, not Greek, no alphabet I could recognize, but somehow I could read it. Each word, though foreign, slid into my mind like a memory I'd forgotten I had. The longer I stared, the more I felt like I was sinking. Not physically, but mentally. Like the world around me was dissolving, and only the page remained. I snapped the journal shut and waited for midnight. When the hour came, I opened it again. The text was already glowing faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. And I read it, word for word. Every syllable tasted like ash. The lights flickered violently, tools rattled on their pegs, the walls trembled like something enormous was pressing against them from outside. Then silence. The journal's ink faded back to black. A new line appeared at the bottom. "The holes are sealed, for now." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours, but the next line hit me like a hammer to the gut. "She is still in the trunk." I turned to the Accord. That damn silver Honda. Its trunk had never opened. I'd checked it a dozen times, locked tight no matter what I tried. But this time, it was ajar, just barely. Enough to invite curiosity, enough to tempt. A piece of cloth was sticking out, white, faded, torn. It looked like part of a dress. I got closer. My breath fogged the air in front of me, cold, too cold. And then I heard her whisper, "Mike." "Wendy." I wanted to run. Instead, I reached forward and touched the trunk lid. It opened with a groan like a dying animal. Inside was darkness. And inside the darkness, movement. Something shifted, and from that impossible void, a pale hand slowly emerged. It reached toward me, trembling, not threatening, begging. Then her face appeared, sunken, wrong, but still her. "Please," she whispered, "don't let them take me again." I stood there, frozen, unsure if I was looking at a ghost or a trap. Then the trunk slammed shut on its own and locked. I backed away, my hands shaking, heart pounding so hard I felt dizzy. The journal closed with a thump behind me and whispered one final line for the night. "You broke a rule." The trunk was not yours to open. The garage didn't feel like mine anymore. Every time I turned around, it was like the walls had shifted. The tools were subtly out of place. The cars seemed different, like they'd aged 20 years overnight, rust blooms creeping up the sides, paint peeling where it had been pristine the day before. It was subtle at first, but after I opened the trunk, the changes sped up. That night, the temperature inside dropped so fast the concrete sweated frost. I could see my breath in front of me, pluming in frantic bursts. The Accord's trunk stayed locked tight, but I could hear tapping again. Only this time it wasn't asking to be let out. It was laughing, low, muffled, cruel. I checked the journal at first light, my hands trembling worse than usual. March 16th. Entry. "You are marked. They know your scent, your voice, your soul. You cannot leave the garage until the next blood moon. If you attempt to leave, the black sedan will find you. If you attempt to destroy the Accord, she will be freed, but it will not be Wendy anymore." I sank into the battered office chair and buried my head in my hands. Marked. I didn't know what that meant exactly. I could guess. The mirror in the bathroom had started leaking black fluid from the taped-over edges. Even the boarded windows looked like they breathed when I wasn't staring directly at them, and my reflection, when I caught a glimpse in the metal of a hubcap or the shine of a car door, wasn't always doing what I was doing. Sometimes it was smiling when I wasn't. Sometimes it watched me. Around noon, a familiar sound cut through the silence, tires crunching on gravel. I peered through a slit in the office blinds. A truck. Not a black sedan, thank God, but an old Ford pickup. Mud splattered, Arkansas plates. A figure climbed out, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and denim jacket. It was Marcus Caulfield. Or it looked like him. Problem was, Marcus had died. I'd seen the body. Sheriff Billings had shown me the photos. His skin melted like candle wax, eyes empty sockets, mouth twisted into an O of permanent terror. And yet, there he was, alive. Walking toward my garage, he stopped at the entrance and looked up at the hand-painted sign, Landry's Auto Repair. Then he smiled. It wasn't a normal smile, it was wide, too wide. His lips peeled back, revealing rows of teeth that didn't look human, small, sharp, many. I backed away from the window. The journal slammed shut on the desk behind me, as if warning me, do not engage. Marcus's voice floated into the garage, distorted and sticky sweet. Mike, my boy, come out now, got a job for you. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The doorknob rattled. A heavy fist thudded once against the office door. You owe us, Marrows, he hissed. Come take your place. I pressed myself tighter against the wall. Another thud, harder this time, splintering wood. I slid my hand toward the crowbar under my desk. Another thud, and the door cracked down the middle. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing him, to go away. And then the sound changed. Not a fist pounding, but scratching, fingernails dragging down the door in slow, deliberate strokes. Long, too long. A terrible pressure built in my head, like someone was trying to force their thoughts into my brain. I heard words without hearing them, felt them inside. We miss you. We built this town for you. We made all of this for you, Marrows. Come see what we made. Come be what you were meant to be. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted iron, focused on the pain, focused on me. The scratching stopped. Silence. After 5 agonizing minutes, I dared a glance out the cracked window. The truck was gone. But where it had been parked, a single item lay in the gravel. A key. Old. Rusted, attached to a tag that read simply, basement. I didn't want to touch it. But the journal's pages fluttered open on their own, as if blown by a phantom wind. New words burned into the paper. The basement is the cradle. What you seek is beneath you. But beware, once you enter, the door will not open again until the ritual is complete. There was no basement under my garage, I was sure of it. I'd been here for months. The foundation was solid slab, no hidden doors, no trapdoors. Just concrete and dirt. But the key sat there, gleaming with a wet, oily sheen, daring me to pick it up. Against every instinct screaming inside me, I pocketed it. The minute I did, the ground under my feet shifted. A crack opened behind the shop bays, near the hydraulic lifts. A thin seam of darkness, like a door. I stared at it, heart thundering. Behind me the Accord's trunk creaked open again, slow and hungry. And something giggled in the dark. The crack in the concrete was unnatural. Not just in appearance, it was how it felt. Like it wasn't a break in stone, but a tear in reality itself. The edges shimmered faintly, like oil on water. And the smell, thick, metallic and sour, like rotting meat left out in the rain. I should have walked away, locked the garage, driven until the wheels fell off. But I didn't. Instead, I slid the rusted basement key into my pocket and knelt by the split in the floor. My fingers trembled as I traced the edge, half expecting it to bite. But it was solid, cool. Then the ground sank. Before we move on, please donate me in the form of subscribe. Not a quake, not a collapse. It lowered, like an elevator descending in silence, revealing a spiral staircase beneath where none should have existed. The journal fluttered open one more time on my desk as I passed it. Once entered, you must complete the cycle. Do not take fire with you, light attracts them below. Speak only when spoken to. The hallway listens. I left my flashlight behind, along with the crowbar. There was no railing, just damp stone steps, slick with something I didn't want to identify. The air grew colder with every turn downward, heavier, thicker. By the 6th step, I could no longer hear the wind above. By the 12th, the smell of oil and rust was replaced by something older. Earth, wet, primordial earth, and by the 23rd, I heard whispering. Not loud, Not obvious, but constant, like a room full of people breathing secrets just beyond comprehension. At the bottom, the spiral opened into a narrow corridor carved from rough stone. Not brick, not concrete, stone, like a cave, but no cave had walls that pulsed. Yes, pulsed. Slowly, like a sleeping lung. Something moved through the stone behind me as I stepped forward. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. Something massive, dragging its weight through the dark like a whale beneath the sea. I walked for what felt like hours. Time didn't work right down there. My thoughts grew slippery. My name, Mike, felt foreign on my tongue. Then came the doors. 13 of them, all spaced evenly down the hallway, each marked with a sigil I didn't recognize but somehow understood. Memories that weren't mine surfaced, old ones, buried ones. In one flash, I saw myself, or someone who looked like me, carving those symbols into stone with a chisel made of bone. Another memory, fire and screaming, and a voice chanting, "The vessel must be made ready." I staggered forward. Each door vibrated as I passed. Behind the first, I heard a woman crying. Behind the fourth, scratching, desperate and rhythmic. Behind the eighth, laughter. Familiar. My own. The 12th door had no sound. But it bled. Thick trails of black ichor oozed from beneath it, pooling on the stone floor in slow drips. And the 13th door was already open. Inside was a room lit by a single flickering lantern suspended from the ceiling. In the center, an altar made of car parts, engine blocks, exhaust pipes, twisted steel, and resting atop it, another journal, not the one from the Accord. This one was bound in skin. I approached, my feet moving before my brain could catch up. As I drew close, the journal opened itself. My name was scrawled across the top of the page. But not Mike. Maros. Under it, "You are the last keeper of the gate. Your blood is the final lock. You have broken 5 of the 7 seals. The courier's ride." I reached out, and my fingers brushed the page. The moment I did, pain exploded behind my eyes. Visions tore through me like shrapnel. Wendy, screaming from inside the trunk, her body warped and twisting. Sheriff Billings, on his knees in the woods, carving symbols into his chest with a hunting knife. The black sedan, parked in my childhood driveway. My mother handing over the keys. I collapsed, convulsing on the stone floor, as something ancient and hungry filled my head. It spoke without sound, directly into my soul. You cannot escape the cycle. You are the cycle. I don't know how long I lay there, twitching, eyes wide and staring into nothing. When I came to, the journal was closed, the altar was gone, and the room had changed. Now there was only a mirror, cracked, warped. But the reflection was not my own. It was him, the figure from the Accord, the not-quite-human version of me I'd glimpsed in the chrome of bumpers and metal surfaces. He leaned in, grinning. His lips moved, and I heard the words echo inside the stone. Almost ready. I ran. I don't remember the stairs, the hallway, the doors. I only remember crawling up into the garage, covered in blood and black mold, and some kind of viscous gel that smelled of rot and iron. The crack in the floor sealed behind me. Gone. As if it never existed, but the key remained in my pocket, still warm, still pulsing. The journal was waiting for me on the office desk, the original one, and a new entry had appeared. You brought the basement up with you. Do not sleep, do not eat, do not speak until the bell tolls at dusk. The reflection watches now. It mimics, but it does not obey. Cover all mirrors. Now. The mirror in the bathroom had already cracked, and behind the crack, I saw him again. Grinning. It was as if the entire town had stopped breathing. The second I read that last journal entry, I knew everything had changed. It wasn't just the journal. It wasn't just the basement or the Accord. The air was thick with something else now, something pressing and hungry. I'd broken too many rules, 5 seals shattered, each one pulling me further into the web, each one tightening the noose around the town. And me. The bell tolls at dusk. I couldn't tell if I was still in evening shade anymore. Maybe I'd crossed over. Maybe the whole town had, inch by inch, into something worse, something far beyond the reach of any rules or laws. The sun was low, and the garage had become colder than it had any right to be. My breath fogged up in front of me. The lights flickered and buzzed, like the power was struggling to hold onto the wires. I went into the bathroom. The mirror was still cracked, but now it pulsed. The reflection, the other one, stared back at me with its wide, sick grin. I grabbed a towel and covered the glass, but the reflection didn't disappear. Instead, it seemed to shift beneath the fabric. Eyes moved. The smile widened. Fingers scraped against the back of the towel from behind. I didn't look. Not again. There was no point. It wasn't me in that mirror anymore. I ran into the office, hands shaking as I grabbed the journal. The page flipped open automatically, as if it had been waiting. March 18th. Entry. The bell has tolled. You have until the third strike to choose. If you refuse, the town will fall. If you accept, you will become the gatekeeper. The vessel. There is no other way. The bell tolls for you. The courier's ride. I dropped the journal, my heart pounding, my pulse echoed in my ears like a drum. I ran out the back door to the garage's rear lot. And there it was. The black sedan. Parked exactly where it had been last time. Its engine ticked, its headlights gleamed, even though the sun was barely setting. I took a step forward, but something made me pause. The tapping started again, but this time it wasn't from the cars, it was from the ground. A rhythmic knock, 3 sharp, deliberate raps in a pattern that was far too human. It came from beneath the earth. The bell tolls for you. I looked down at the cracked earth beneath me. It shifted. The ground groaned and churned as if something was pushing its way up. Then 3 slow, deliberate knocks, louder now. The bell. The sound came from deeper than the earth, deeper than the ground under the garage. It felt like it was coming from inside me. Inside the bones of the town, like it was something I couldn't escape, no matter how far I ran. I stood frozen in place, every muscle in my body screamed for me to flee, but I couldn't. The black sedan's engine sputtered, and I turned back toward it. The window rolled down, slowly, methodically. A hand extended. It wasn't pale this time. It was familiar. It was mine. The fingers moved with too much precision, too much knowing, as they opened the palm, inviting me to take something. An old, rusted key. For a moment I felt my body move on its own. The key was exactly like the one I'd seen before, thick, heavy, tarnished. A key to something I couldn't remember. I hesitated. The journal flashed in my mind. You must complete the cycle. I swallowed hard and walked toward the sedan. The door opened. The man who stepped out of the car looked too familiar. His face was like mine, but older, thinner. His eyes were sunken, with too much knowledge behind them, too much pain. He was grinning. "Mike," he said. Or should I say, Maros? The words felt like nails scraping against my skin. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. Instead, I found myself reaching for the key. My hand moved of its own accord. The man grinned wider, his smile stretched unnaturally, almost as if his skin couldn't contain it. "You don't have to be afraid, Mike. You're not going to lose anything. It's time." I could feel the weight of the decision pressing in on me, the weight of fate. I stepped forward, and as I did, I felt the ground beneath my feet sink. I tried to stop, tried to pull my hand away, but the key was in my palm, and it fit perfectly into the slot in my chest. I staggered back as the key twisted inside me, and I gasped for breath, my skin crawling with the sensation of something crawling inside me. I fell to my knees, gasping for air, and the world began to swirl around me. The black sedan faded, replaced by endless shadows, twisted landscapes, and in those shadows the couriers stood, watching, waiting. They wore faces like mine, like everyone I knew, and yet they were wrong, empty. Their eyes were hollow black pits, their mouths stretched into smiles that made no sense, grinning, waiting for the moment when I would surrender completely. The bell tolled again, but this time it wasn't coming from the earth. It was coming from inside me. The key twisted, and the world broke. I woke up in the shop. The radio crackled to life. The black sedan was gone. But the bell still tolled in my head. I had chosen. The cycle had begun again, and this time there was no turning back. I woke with a start, a strangled breath tearing itself from my chest. My eyes snapped open, heart thudding against my ribs. For a moment, I wasn't sure where I was. If the world around me was real, or if I was still trapped in whatever nightmare the key had unlocked. The smell of oil, burnt rubber, and metal filled the air. I was in the garage. The dull hum of fluorescent lights buzzed above. The engine I'd been working on when I last remember, an old Ford pickup, was still on the lift. But something had changed. The weight of the place had shifted, thickened, like the very air around me had turned to concrete. I sat up slowly, every part of me aching, as though I'd been pulled through some terrible rift. I glanced around, my body tense, expecting them to be watching. But there was no one. Nothing seemed out of place. Except the journal. It sat on the counter, open as if it had been waiting for me to return. The page flicked back and forth as though it were alive, taunting me, mocking me. I felt the pull of it immediately, the knowledge that I couldn't walk away. I reached for it, and then I remembered. The bell, the key. I jerked my hand back, but it didn't matter. I'd already chosen. There was no escaping now. The journal flipped to a new page, as though it had been waiting for me all this time. March 19th. Entry. The final cycle begins. You will see them again, all of them. The door is open now. Your vessel is ready. Do not fight. It is too late. Once the bell tolls, the couriers will come. But they will not leave. You must walk into the void and claim your place in the line. I was in the line now, not just some hapless mechanic cursed by the journals, but a keeper, a vessel. My fate was no longer my own. The town's fate was no longer its own. We were all part of something larger, a pattern, a cycle that stretched out of time, beyond reason. But why? Why had I been chosen? Why had I, Mike Landry, a broken man with nothing left, been the one to hold the key? I stood up, my legs shaking, and walked toward the garage door. The night was coming quickly now. Shadows stretched long across the yard, and I could feel something waiting in the distance. The couriers were drawing closer. I could hear their whispers, their voices calling my name, urging me to come to them. A tap on the door, not a knock, a tap, like a signal. I didn't need to open it. I didn't need to see them. I knew who was on the other side, the woman in white, Wendy Billings. But something was different. There was no malice in the tapping, no frantic desperation like before. This was a call. I stepped away from the door, my pulse racing, and walked back to the desk. I opened the drawer. The key. I hadn't noticed it before, not clearly, not until now. I held it up in the light. It had grown hotter. It burned against my skin, its surface slick with sweat, but it was no longer a tool. It was part of me. I didn't need to be told what to do. The journal had already written the instructions in my blood. The key went into the lock. A tremor passed through the garage as the door slowly began to creak open. But this wasn't just a door. It was the gateway, the line, the place where the couriers would cross into our world. My vision blurred. The shadows outside twisted, slithering like smoke. The ground trembled beneath my feet, and for the first time, I felt their presence. The couriers, not as distant figures in the periphery of my mind, but as tangible beings, filling the space around me. They were here. The door swung wide, revealing nothing but the emptiness beyond. It wasn't a yard, it wasn't a road, it was a chasm, a void. The bell tolled, reverberating through my chest, as if it had become part of me, as if it had always been part of me. The couriers stood in the void, their figures shifting and morphing, not quite human, not quite anything. They were in the shape of familiar faces, people I had known, people I had seen, twisted and bent, their features contorted by something unnatural. They were smiling. "Mike," said a voice that was mine but wasn't. It was a chorus of voices all layered over one another, speaking in perfect unison. It's time. The pull was irresistible. I didn't want to step into the void. I didn't want to walk toward them. But I had no choice. The door closed behind me. The world shifted, and I was no longer standing in the garage. I was standing on the edge of the void, surrounded by them, the couriers, all whispering in that same unified voice. I felt my body change. My skin pulled tight, Bones crackling and reshaping, muscles lengthening. It was like being torn apart and stitched back together all at once. "You are ready," they whispered. "You are one of us now." And that's when I understood. I had always been one of them. The cycle continues. The journals will find someone new to keep the door, to take my place, and the bell will toll again. Before we move on, please donate me in the form of subscribe.